Welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. Beneath the surface is a world of gliding monsters, one you can choose not to step into or leave at any time. PseudoPod, episode 781, October 29th, 2021. This week's story, Screen Haunt by Oren Gray. Hello everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alistair, your host, and happy horror Christmas Eve. Our story this week was first published in It Came From The Multiplex, published by Hex Publishers, that's a lot of use of the word publishers, in September 2020. It comes to us from Oren Gray, who is a long-time friend of The Tentacle. Oren is a writer, editor, tabletop game designer, amateur film scholar, and monster expert, whose stories of monsters, ghosts, and sometimes the ghosts of monsters have appeared in dozens of anthologies, including Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year. Oren is the author of several books, including Painted Monsters and Other Strange Beasts, and Guignol and Other Sardonic Tales. You can, and should, find him online at orengray.com. Your reader this week is Lalana Dara. So, without further ado, we have a story for you, and we promise you, it's true.
Screen Haunt by Oren Gray. Read by Lalana Dara. "What are you afraid of?" Jean asks, kicking her feet on the top bunk. I'm lying underneath looking up at the springs where they sag down under her weight. My mind is racing like a game of memory, flipping over cards to see what comes crawling when exposed to the light. What am I afraid of? How about everything? Dogs and spiders and those firecrackers called jumping jacks, and cancer and splinters, and that story about the girl who has a spider lay eggs in her face, and, while we're on the subject, earwigs, and that other story about the girl with an axe-wielding maniac in her back seat, and the guy in the pickup behind her keeps turning on his brights, but really he's just trying to warn her. And infections, and going to the swimming pool this summer because everyone expects me to wear a bikini, but I'm too fat, so I've still got a one-piece. And Mrs. Conroy at school, and getting a C in algebra, and 18 years later, I want to go back to that day and give her a different answer than whatever I say. As I put my feet on the springs and push up, feeling her weight push me back down, I want to tell her that what I'm afraid of is her not being there. But at that age, even though I worry about everything, I don't yet know to worry about that. What are you afraid of? In big white letters up on the screen of the Galileo. I'm standing in front of the seats and behind the couches. Alex is next to me in the dark, but for just a second it feels like I'm alone. The screen expands to fill my peripheral vision, and I'm just a tiny shadow in front of those massive white letters that are burning a hole in the world. Then the letters are gone and the screen lights up with a grainy Halloween safety video that I've salvaged and adjusted to make it look sepia-toned, like an old newspaper photo come to life, and suddenly the theater resolves back into focus around me. "Looks like it works," Alex says. And I nod and say, "Looks like." The safety video was made in 1962. The kids all wear weird, lumpen, papier-mâché masks and handmade costumes. It couldn't be better. At the end, it freeze frames on one shot that I added in for the movie. And that shot pans out to become a picture in a newspaper, resolving like a pointillist painting to dots of black and gray as the camera pulls back so you can see the headline. 3 go missing on Halloween night. The picture, which I shot on the street where Jean and I used to live, is of 3 kids dressed in homemade Halloween costumes. Their masks carefully designed by Rufus Santiago, based on drawings that I pulled from Jean's old notebooks. A witch, a devil, and a vampire with a bat mask over its eyes. They're walking down the middle of a suburban street at night. Trees and sidewalks and only the rumor of houses to either side of them. There's just enough of a hill that everything disappears behind the rise they're cresting as they walk toward the camera. A cheat light over the ridge to cast them all in chiaroscuro so you can see the masks well enough to recognize them later. The witch mask is a submarine bluish-green in color, the mouth open in an uneven smile that could as easily be a grimace. The handful of teeth candy corn yellow. There's a witch's hat built into the mask, tiny and conical, with stars around the brim. The devil has a pencil-thin gold mustache that curls up at the sides, but not the same on either end. The mustache seems to blend like smoke with gilded arabesques that decorate the painted eyes. The devil's smile is less uncertain than the witch's, and his teeth are sharp. The vampire mask is pale with a greenish-yellow undertone. The bat is purple with green fangs. "Seems like it should have been a ghost or something," Devin said at the bar after we showed the work print for the first time. "Or a pumpkin and a skull?" I asked. Devin was always full of constructive criticism. He'd asked why I set the movie in '84 rather than today, or when I was a teenager. And I told him that it was because I didn't want to worry about cell phones, which was only a half-truth. It was also because that's when the movies I grew up watching were set. Maybe he was right about the masks, but I used the designs in the notebook, and there wasn't a ghost in there. Except that there was, wasn't there? Not that you can see any of that in the first shot. The image is grayscale. The newspaper dated November 1964, 20 years before the events of the movie. The masks are all washed out by the faux grain of the film. But of course they'll be back, those 3 anonymous trick-or-treaters. In the script, they're identified by their masks. The witch, the devil, the bat. In reality, they're played by 3 girls I met in film school, even though the devil is supposed to be a boy. Liz, Viv, and Steph. Their names as short as they are. I mean, I'm not tall, and Viv still barely comes up to my shoulder. That's why they were perfect to credibly play kids, without me having to jump through the hoops that actually hiring child actors and having them shoot at night would have entailed. There are a few kids in the movie, of course. Devin's son is in there, all tousled blonde hair, and some of the kids in the theater class that Liz teaches at the high school, wearing replicas of those cheapy Ben Cooper costumes that we all seemed to wear when we were kids. But they're only for establishing shots, mostly. I didn't want them to play the monsters. "You are always such a happy kid," my mom says whenever I try to tell her I have an anxiety disorder. That I'm seeing a therapist and taking blue and white pills and things are getting better. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." I don't say, because she doesn't want to hear it, won't hear it, no matter what I do. I was always like this. I just hid it from you. Which isn't entirely fair, because I hid it from everyone, didn't I? The only person who could see through my bullshit was always Jean, and now she's gone. So I have to do it myself. The night before the premiere, we stay up till 1 a.m. watching the movie through on the big screen. We've already spooled parts of it up there, but never with everything going at once. The synth loops and jangling guitars from Bat Lightning, the house lights down, the whole 9 yards. When it's over, and they've pulled the masks off the trick-or-treaters to reveal the mummified faces underneath, also courtesy of Santiago, and the screen has gone black and those 2 words come up, I find myself caught off guard yet again. even though they've always been there, and I'm the one who put them there. For Jean. "Are you all right?" Alex asks as I push past him and out the fire exit into the alley. "I just need some air," I say, and I hear Steph stop him as he tries to follow me out. "It's all just a lot, you know," she says, her hand on his arm. I stand in the alley, the streetlights reflecting on puddles of water, and cry until I stop shaking, until my breath is coming out in puffs of steam and I've hunched my shoulders under the orange and black sweater and pulled the sleeves down around my hands, but I'm still too cold, and I have to go back in. Fortunately, by then, I've wiped my eyes, and it's dim enough that I don't think most of the crowd could tell even if they hadn't started celebrating at about the halfway point of the film. I pull up a stool at the bar and manage a smile at Steph that I hope says thank you. Movies don't scare me, I tell my therapist at our second or third session when she asks me why I want to make scary movies. They're, like, the only things that don't scare me, so of course, I want them to. She doesn't seem to understand. And I can't really say that I do either, but it's also about as close as I've ever come to a vision statement. And I want to write it down in case someone asks me that same question in an interview or something. You know, once I hit the big time, I don't ask her for a pen and paper, though. It'll take a bunch more sessions before we get to that point. In the original screenplay, the unmasking of the trick-or-treaters isn't the end. In the screenplay, I describe them as looking like mummified dolls underneath the masks. Santiago did a pretty good job of nailing that, actually. But then I go on. They fall to the ground, but don't stay still. Close-up of the dust and bones as something begins to boil out of them. A green-black smoke that's too thick to be a vapor. Like when you drop a smoke bomb into a bucket of water. A witch's brew that boils through the air in 3 dimensions. Pull back as it rises up from their bodies and starts to take form above them. Cut to close-ups of Candace and Judy as they watch. Argento gel on the lights. In the boiling smoke brew, 2 huge yellow moons appear. It doesn't become apparent that they're eyes until wall-eyed pupils roll into view. Beneath them, 2 rows of perfect yellow teeth. Naturally, the haunt, as the screenplay eventually calls the apparition, proved not to be feasible on the budget we had to work with. And even if we had been able to afford some CGI or something, I wanted to stick with effects that could have been achieved in 1984, when the film was set. So we stopped with the trick-or-treaters themselves. "I actually think it makes the movie better," Alex says. "Simpler." I nod, as if I agree. But really, I'm not even thinking about the movie at all. I'm thinking about the nightmare. When you're scared of everything, you learn how to compartmentalize. That's how you get through each day. At Jean's funeral, we bury an empty box, so I focus on that. That empty box becomes a totem. I'm terrified it will tip off its moorings and come crashing to the ground. The lid lolling open, and that Jean's body will come tumbling out. In my mind's eye, her body is gray and rubbery, her joints all cut black lines, like someone was trying to make a marionette. Her mouth hangs at a grotesque angle, and one eye is peeled open, staring, and yellow. "Why do you girls like to watch those scary movies?" Jean's mom would ask. And I never had an answer. But looking back at that funeral, I have one. Finally. I can handle my fear of Jean's decomposing body, her face a terrible rictus, her limbs taking on the horrible life of a mannequin. Better that than my fear of the truth, of the empty box and not knowing what happened to her. She disappeared in 27 minutes and 4 houses. That's how long it took between when she left my place and when her mom called to say she hadn't arrived home. 27 minutes, through the pools of shadow between the porch lights. That was all. But it was enough. The night she disappeared, did I hear a voice whispering outside my room, "What are you afraid of?" Or was it just my imagination? Did I dream that green face with the rolling yellow eyes outside my window as I lay paralyzed in bed? Halloween night. The night of the premiere. Lots of people arrive at the Galileo in costume. They come dressed as clowns and slashers, zombies and characters from video games that I don't recognize. 3 people show up dressed exactly like the trick-or-treaters from the film. So much so that I have to double-take to find Liz and Viv and Steph. But there they are, all sprawled in their street clothes on one of the couches at the front of the house that are set aside for cast and crew. The 3 unknown trick-or-treaters wear long cloaks, just like they do in the film. And they each carry a plastic bucket, just like in the film. A pumpkin, a skull, and the Gillman from Creature from the Black Lagoon. The buckets were designed by Michael Schwartz, another local who makes DIY toys and sells them online, but I don't see him in the theater to ask if he made extras for whoever these people are. "What's up?" Alex asks me, as I stand gaping near the front of the auditorium. I jerk my head toward the 3 trick-or-treaters, who have taken seats at the back of the house, just below the hole where the projector will shine through. Alex reminds me that we released the short film, Halloween Spirit, onto YouTube all the way back when we were raising Kickstarter funds for the feature, so they had plenty of time to work on homebrew costumes. "Be flattered," he says, brushing past me to check the mics. Someone who is finding their seats comes up to chat with me. Something about how much they loved the short and how they're looking forward to the full movie. And I force a smile onto my face and nod and try to pay attention. I do. But out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching those 3 trick-or-treaters, noting how they don't take their masks off after they sit, don't turn their heads to chat with one another. They just stare forward, plastic buckets in their laps, and wait. Sometime after we bury the empty box, I go over to Jean's house and ask her mom if I can get some stuff that I left in her room. It's mostly a lie. There is some stuff of mine in there, sure, but I'm there just to sit in the space that still holds her echo because it's as close to her as I can get. I sit on the bed for as long as I think I can, eyes closed, trying to imagine her weight on the bed beside me, and then I pick up some stuff to make my story credible. I take back my Batman Forever CD and a sweater that I left wadded on her closet floor. And I also take her journal. It isn't a diary. Diaries are private things that you keep in a drawer and lock with a key, decorated with little hearts and butterflies. Jean took her journal with her everywhere. She always had it. It isn't fancy, just a composition notebook with a speckled cover that she plastered with TSOL and Misfit stickers. She sketched in it and wrote her thoughts down in it, roughed out song lyrics for the band that neither of us would ever start. I refrain from flipping through it in her room, but when I get back to mine, I flop down on the bed and turn the pages slowly, reverently. I'm savoring each one, knowing that I'll never get another chance to look at them for the first time, and that there will never be any more. That's how I find the nightmare. That's what the page is labeled, up at the top, in letters that have been traced over multiple times, until they almost punch through the paper. The nightmare. "Ever since I was a little kid," she writes, "I've had this dream. Not even a dream. What do they call it? A night terror. I'm wide awake, or I feel like I am, and I'm in my own bed, except that I can't move. It feels like I'm pinned down, like something incredibly heavy and soft is covering every part of me, but it doesn't hurt and I'm not smothered. I just can't move. My room looks just like it really looks at night, but as I lay there, I notice something. There's a shape in the corner, and it's getting bigger. No, closer. Maybe both. It has a green face and green hands, and it's wearing this big, lumpy black robe, like a monk. Its eyes are huge and round, with black dots for pupils and no irises. Like a muppet, they roll around in its head independently of one another. It's smiling, and it comes toward me, and I want to scream, but I can't, because I can't move, and it reaches out its hands toward me, and it smells like graveyard dirt, and then I usually wake up. Then, obviously written later, because the pen is different. Except, it isn't really like waking up. It's like I was always awake, but the universe woke up, and so the thing is gone, and I can move. But I have this feeling that if the universe ever nods off again, it'll be back. At about midpoint of the movie, when the 4 girls are all still alive, but Pete and Shelley have both been knocked off already by the trick-or-treaters, I go out into the ladies' room. But I'm digging in my purse for the bottle that has my alprazolam so I can add another to the one I dry swallowed before the movie began. I'm bent over the running water of the sink when the door opens behind me, letting in some other patrons that I don't immediately see. It isn't until I feel them behind me that I straighten up. And when the 3 masks from the film are there in the mirror, I drop the pale green pill, and some part of my panicked brain registers every leg of its flight as it ricochets off the sink, off the lid of the trash can, and disappears under one of the stalls. I try to transition my startlement into a socially acceptable laugh, though my heart has turned into a bird beating itself to death against the cage of my ribs, and my hands have already started to shake. "Those are amazing costumes," I say, acting as though they have caught me just at the end of my ablutions and trying to make my way around them to the door. They move to block me. My first instinct is to reach for another alprazolam to replace the one that has flown, but I know better. Whatever they're doing, the part of my brain that I have trained to shield me from the worst of my anxiety provides an endless litany of perfectly harmless explanations. I need to get out of this situation before my panic gets any worse. Once I'm in the lobby, I'll feel safer. I can ask Connor for a drink and wash the pill down with that. "Sorry," I say, as though their move was just one of those things that happen as you both try to get out of one another's way and end up stepping in unison. I try to move around them again, and the devil shifts one step to the side, between me and the door. Their masks are all totally still, and all staring straight at me. The rationalizing part of my brain clams up. There is no longer any possibility of explaining this away. No version of what's happening now is any good. I open my mouth, maybe to scream for Connor, though I doubt he could hear me over all the various noises of the theater. But before I can make a sound, they rush me. They smell like burning leaves. That's the first thing I notice. They're all the same height as they are in the movie, a little shorter than me, the same height as Viv and Steph and Liz. They aren't holding their plastic buckets, and I can feel their hands fasten on me. They're wearing gloves, but still their hands feel dry, brittle, like scarecrow hands. "What are you afraid of?" they all ask, their voices tripping over one another as they tumble out of the holes in their masks. It's the only line they ever have in the movie, and it's provided by Greg Agee, my sound guy, running his voice through 3 different filters. Their voices sound just like that. I punch one of them, the witch, and I feel the hard crack of her mask under my knuckles. It slips loose, but I don't see what's underneath. Yes, I do. That moving black filth, before I am running out of the bathroom. The lobby is empty and dark. There are no streetlights outside the front windows, no cars, but I can hear the movie soundtrack, so I go back into the auditorium. When I left minutes ago, the auditorium was full of people. My friends were sitting on the couches at the front, watching themselves up on the screen. Now it's empty, only dust motes dancing in the beam of the projector. The movie is still going, but the music has died just as my forward momentum does. On the screen is a scene I don't recognize. No, that's not true. I recognize it all right. I just didn't shoot it. That green face all folded in on itself, filling the screen. Those rolling moon eyes, those perfect yellow teeth. An enormous green hand comes through the screen and collides with the red carpet in a cloud of popcorn dust, dragging its knuckles like Kong. The screen isn't torn, just bulged out a little where the hand leaves it, like a swimmer breaking the surface tension of water. The other hand is sliding out of the screen now, the face stretching the surface, those rolling eyes coming toward me as the first hand slides out of its black sleeve and fastens gigantic fingers around me. They smell like graveyard dirt. I steadied myself on the back of one of the seats when I first realized what I was seeing, and as it lifts me up, I feel my fingertips slide off the seat back one by one. When the last one slips away, I'm gone with them. Two words burn in the dark, white against black. They're backward from where I am, because I realize that I am behind the screen somehow, or inside it. They burn brighter and brighter until they burn through the film, even though we shot on digital because it was cheaper. And then they're gone. And everything is gone. From wherever I am, I can hear the theater full of people clapping, though. Clapping for my movie. Clapping for those two words. Clapping for Jean.
Those of you who've been around these parts for a while will know I quite like things, by and large. Culture, I think it's pretty neat, and movies are possibly my favourite form of it. For me, growing up, the cinema screen was a window into a world that wasn't 30 kilometres long, and didn't feature both my school, the hospital where I was born, my house, and everyone I'd ever met. It was proof there was life out there, and with movies like The Lost Starfighter or Empire Records, or pretty much anything Kevin Smith made in his first decade of work, they kind of proved there were spaces for me too, something which my childhood, as many childhoods do, left in some doubt. You probably know what's coming, but just in case you don't, we're going to be talking about the pandemic for about 3 paragraphs. Skip forward maybe 2 minutes, or wait for me to say, but I'm back in theatres, if you'd rather not. I used to go to the movies weekly. I'm lucky across about 3 axes. There's a cinema close enough, I'm healthy enough to walk there, and I have the money for tickets, and also that said tickets are pretty cheap anyway, so it used to be part of my routine. Finish my work for the week, go see a movie. Any movie. It's $5, right? Then COVID-19 happened, and I have 2 clear memories of the week before lockdown. The first is crossing the bridge to the mall, which the cinema is adjacent to, overhearing a woman talking about buying pallets of bottled water. The second is seeing the weirdest double bill of my life, Kristen Stewart in Underwater and Anya Taylor-Joy in Emma. They're both really good, by the way, and coming from me, who has never once connected with Austen, that's high praise indeed. I mean, Underwater has more aquatic monsters than death, but the carriage joke in Emma beats anything in Underwater. Seriously, check them out. But the fact Emma was a story that I never liked, and that I saw anyway, is what stuck with me. It was the last breath of air before the long dive, the last moment before I went wheels up. I could have gone to the movies after that, for a while, but I didn't, because I didn't feel safe. That choice, the insularity that came with it, and the emotional and psychological stress of the ongoing situation have marked me, the way we're all marked. I'm lucky. The damage that I've sustained is not fleeting, but it certainly can be, and is, being worked off. Part of the process, for me, is going back to the movies every week. I wear a mask, unless I'm eating or drinking. I go during the day because it's less crowded, but I am back in theatres. The window is open again, and my aggregate stress levels have dropped by about 1/3. I even make it through the John Boyega voice to "The movies are amazing, turn your phone off" PSA without crying most of the time. They're a safe space for me. A liminal point where I can put stuff down and rest for a moment. What the protagonist does here, using film as a means of honouring her friend and exorcising the monster that has haunted her possible memories for decades. It's an act of vast courage on her part and trust in the process in the most literal sense. She tries to bind the monster to fiction, to control it with words and shots and key grips and craft services, to talk it into specificity instead of letting it stalk the mists of abstraction and potential, dragging something impossible into the light where it can be understood, where you can see its edges, where it can be killed. And it fails. That's a type of horror we don't see often, and it's the one that sticks with us because the calls are coming from deep inside the narrative structure, and they are making some changes to the shooting draft. Expertly, terrifyingly, hauntingly done. Thank you both. We're now paying associate editors, who are slush readers and the first line of contact for every magazine and author. They are the unsung heroes of the industry. It's time we sung them. We're currently paying all 4 shows associate editors at a reduced rate because we aren't quite at the target donation yet, but we're trying, and we can only get there with your help. So if you can, please donate either time or money. Time's easy. Did you like this story? Talk about it on social media. Leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Anything like that helps like you wouldn't believe. That whole rising tide lifts all boats thing, it's true. For money, we rely on you for every single one of our costs. Every single one. Stories, staff, tech, you name it. And there are a bunch of ways that you can donate. The most obvious one is you can go in through PayPal or Patreon and donate just a single one-off amount, and that's really helpful. What's also helpful is if you subscribe, which you can do from as little as $5 a month, again through either Patreon or PayPal, and now through Twitch. If you go in through Patreon or PayPal, what you'll get is a bunch of audio goodies, and with Patreon some other stuff at higher levels too. Through Twitch, with 5 minutes, you can support us for $5 a month for free via Amazon. If you go to escapeartists.net/Twitch, you'll be able to find out more. It's a little fiddly, but we have a walkthrough there which will sort you right out. We'll be back next week with Sleep Hygiene by Gemma Files. Then, as now, we will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Have a fantastic Halloween, everybody. The Halloween parade will be along shortly. I hope you watch some brilliant horror movies and eat some really questionable food, which is in the shape of unconvincing horror movie stuff. I certainly will do. Our closing quote this week is from T.S. Eliot's To Walter de la Mare. Or when the lawn is pressed by unseen feet, and ghosts return gently at twilight, gently go at dawn, the sad, intangible who grieve and yearn. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
It's a PseudoPod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.